All right, I was going to talk about I was thinking about talking about like transfers today. You know, Steph Hall, former Pitt safety, former Central Valley guy, came to Pitt in the 2021 recruiting class. Looked like he would be in the rotation. Maybe one of the top 4 safeties this year. Decided to transfer. I think he transferred after the season. He might have transferred after the spring. I forget exactly. But either way, he's at Youngstown State. He's a starting safety for the Penguins. So Pitt's going to see him this week when Youngstown State comes to Acrisure Stadium. And so I was going to talk about transfers and who Pitt's lost and who Pitt's added and that kind of thing. But the more I thought about it, well, I mean, a couple of things happened. Number one, it's an off week next week, so we'll have plenty of time to sort of take stock of the players Pitt lost and the players that Pitt added. But number two, and perhaps more importantly, yesterday we had a press conference with Eli Holstein. We talked with Pitt's quarterback. You can see that video right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And we talked to him for 12 or 13 minutes. It was rather long, and it was good. It was a really good interview. It was really interesting to hear from him. I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say. A lot of those we've already highlighted. We're going to highlight. You can read about them on Panther-Lair.com, and as I say, you can watch the video for yourself. I think everybody locally is going to be writing about that as well. And it's what you would expect. He's the quarterback, and he spoke and said some really good things. It was one of the better, as my esteemed colleague Jerry DePaula said after the interview was over. And Jerry's been around for a long time. He said that might have been, maybe the best interview we've had all season. Now, Jerry, the season's short, but nevertheless, I agree with him. I thought it was really good. And if you haven't checked it out, go look at it. It's right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But as we were talking to Eli Holstein, and after we talked to him, and I thought more about what he had said and kind of went over his comments and the general tone of things. And like, look, you see somebody in a press conference you don't know. Like they're presenting to you, they're projecting whatever they want to project. You know what I mean? They're presenting to you the version of themselves that they want to present to you. So you don't take what they say in press conferences to mean everything. I mean, we did a whole spring full of press conferences with guys like Deion Hayes and Solomon DeShields, and here they are. They're gone. Hayes is at Colorado and DeShields is at Texas A&M. So you don't put too much stock into it. But listening to some of Holstein's comments and some of his, sort of the tone of his conversation and tone of some of his remarks, I just kept thinking more and more about who he is, who this Pitt team is, and how right now, as we sit here on September 19th, heading into week 4 of the college football season, with where Pitt is on the schedule, with where they've already positioned themselves after going 3-0 through the first 3 games, and kind of where they stand overall on offense and defense with the season and everything, and just sort of how it's all laying out. Like, I can't shake the feeling that Pitt is in what might be an exactly perfect spot right now. And everything I'm about to say for the next 20 minutes or however long we talk here, I'm going to say with a full understanding that you can take nothing for granted. With a full understanding that it is very easy to jinx this football program. With a full understanding that if we talk too much about good things, inevitably you will get the bad things. And so I understand that. But there's a couple things I want to talk about with this team, where they're at right now, where they're headed, where they are in the schedule, where the offense is, where the defense is, where this quarterback is, and where this team is overall in 2024. It's a very different place than I think we all expected them to be after 3 games. And here they are heading into week 4. And they just might be exactly where you would want them to be. Not just 3-0. Of course you would want them to be 3-0. Of course you would want them to have a perfect win-loss record. But even more than that, they might be exactly where you would want them to be. They might be in the exactly perfect spot heading into week 4. Let's talk about where this Pitt team is right now and whether they really are in perfect position heading into week 4. It's kind of a broad, sort of nebulous topic, but I got a few specific thoughts we'll dive into. Let's talk about it here on the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Thursday. It's the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. The website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports coverage you can possibly handle. Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, anything else going on in the world of Pitt sports, you find it right here, or right there, rather, at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And then, of course, we have our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You get all of our Pitt video content, these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Our weekly live show like we did last night, every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Our post-game shows, which are some of the most fun things we do, and I think people enjoy those the most. I know I do. We do that after every game. We'll probably be live on Saturday night a little bit later. I'm guessing we'll probably be live around 8 o'clock. Let's shoot for then. Let's shoot for right around 8. Don't hold me to it if it's 8:15 or 8:30. But we'll have a specific time on Saturday, and we'll let you know when that is. But we'll hang out for an hour or 2 hours or however long it takes to talk about Pitt, Youngstown State. We'll have some drinks. We'll talk some Pitt football. It's always a lot of fun. You want to make sure you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe button's right down there, so it makes it nice and easy for you. All right, so I said that, a conversation with Eli Holstein yesterday, an interview we did with him, got me thinking more about this team and where they are. And it wasn't just that conversation, actually, because we also had a conversation with Archie Collins, Pitt's cornerbacks coach. And right off the bat, first question for Archie Collins was like, look, and I asked this question. That's why I remember what the question was. The first question was like, look, we asked you all offseason, what's going to happen with your corners? You're going to have all these new guys out there after having MJ Devonshire, Marquez Williams, and AJ Woods for a couple of years. You got this new group. How's it going to go? We asked him all the time. All offseason, we asked him in the spring. We asked him in training camp. And so now, 3 games in, how have they been? And he said, of course, they're doing better. They're getting better. They're seeing all the things we want them to see, this and that. But he made a comment that, and I followed up with him and asked, a follow-up question about this, that, basically to the effect that, like, with Battle and Gandy and Lynham, with Rashad Battle, Rylan Gandy, and Tamon Lynham, the 3 corners who have played the most for Pitt so far this season, it's not just that they've been getting better over the course of the season, but he saw a marked improvement from the Cincinnati game to the West Virginia game. Like there was he felt like that game was a big step forward, not just the general overall improvement, but that game specifically was a big step forward for Gandy, Battle, and Lynham. And I thought that was interesting, to say, like, to really sort of emphasize the difference there. I think we all felt like we saw it. Battle and Gandy both gave up some big plays against Cincinnati. And then I think you saw them sort of bounce back. Rashad Battle was officially credited with 2 pass breakups, and I think they were both huge. One saved a touchdown and forced West Virginia to kick a field goal, as opposed to being able to get a touchdown, which ended up looming large in that game. And I think Gandy played well, played better as well, and I think Lynham continues to progress. So I think we saw that, and that stuck with me because as I think about this team overall, where they are heading into week 4. I think you're seeing a lot of things. I'm not going to sit here and say, you're seeing a lot of things alike. Of course, you're seeing things alike. They're 3-0. So you're going to see a lot of things to like. Everybody who's undefeated right now sees a lot of things to like. But I think maybe what's most impressive and most important is that you're seeing a lot of steps forward. You're seeing a lot of improvement. Whether it's the corners. And Gandy and Battle and Lynham, and how they've steadily gotten better game after game. How they took the Cincinnati game where they gave up some big plays and took a big leap forward, or a big step forward at least, in the West Virginia game. I think that's huge. You know what I mean? And seeing that improvement is so important. And I think it's so important for where the team is now. It's obviously important in building the 3-0 start, but it's going to be important for them going forward. We talked yesterday about Nate Matlack and how he leads the ACC in pressures with 14 pressures, and 3 sacks, which isn't a bad total through 3 games. Like we said, if he can average, 1 sack per game, he'll be in great shape, and so will Pitt. But pressure-wise, we talk about the 14 pressures. Half of those came in the West Virginia game. According to Pro Football Focus, he had 4 against Kent State, 3 against Cincinnati, and then 7 in the West Virginia game. Getting a little bit better. The defensive line remains the biggest question mark for this defense. I think the linebackers are taking some big steps forward. Like I said, what Archie Collins said about the corners. I think the safeties have been pretty good. You've gotten 2 interceptions in 3 games from those guys. They've gotten a ton of tackles. Cruz Brookins is making the plays and all this kind of stuff. But the defensive line is the big question mark. you're seeing Matlack getting better. You're seeing Francis Brew being worked in more and more. You're seeing Sincere Edwards. I think you're seeing him show up more and more week after week, being around the ball as a true freshman. You're seeing Jimmy Scott get a huge sack, his first career sack in that West Virginia game. And so I think you're seeing those incremental improvements that are so essential for any team over the course of a season, but particularly one that, if you're looking at Pitt's defense, that has as many new players as they have, new starters at 9 out of 11 positions. And you're seeing that incremental improvement. You're seeing steps forward. And I think that's huge. I think that's huge coming out of, this 3-0 start to the season. And I'm building to something more that I'm going to say about all this, but this is all sort of building toward that. I think with the offense, look, I pointed out the third down issues yesterday, right? And I still think that's a problem for this offense. That's something they've got to get better at. And getting better at that will help them score more early so they're not stuck in a spot where they've got to come back from being down double digits in the fourth quarter any more than they already have. That'll help them. But I can't get past, and I don't think we should forget, all the good things that have happened with this offense so far. Even if you want to say like, wow, some of those trick plays were pretty bad calls, that was the first real blemish on Cade Bell's resume so far this season. Like, I would agree with you. It was the first real blemish on Cade Bell's resume this season, which says a whole lot that he's gone through 3 games and been pretty good. Like, aside from a few of those, like, the flea flicker or this play or that play that, almost gets blown up, like the regular offense, the normal offense has been pretty good. Guys have been getting open. Desmond Reed's had opportunities. It didn't work the running game didn't work as much in the West Virginia game, but the receivers are open. There's opportunities for Gavin Bartholomew, who's on pace for the most targets of his career. And, I think by extension, the most receptions of his career, as we've all been waiting for him to see. There was a funny exchange yesterday. I think it was our good friend Jerry DePaula again asked Gavin Bartholomew, where do you feel like you've improved the most this season? And he said, I'm not really sure. Gavin said, El Barto said, I'm not really sure. I'll have to get back to you on that, on where he's improved the most. And I could only think that what went through his head was, well, I don't have an offensive coordinator who for some reason seems to hate me and doesn't want me to get the ball. Because I think that was the case the last 2 years, and it didn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to you, and it probably didn't make any sense to Gavin Bartholomew. But he's getting used. You know what I mean? He's involved in the game plays. I think Kenate Mumfield is playing at a really high level. I think Kenny Johnson is showing some of that superstar ability. Like, Raphael Williams has been, like, quietly really solid. He's got a couple of touchdown catches for this team. CJ Lee is getting targeted, although he hasn't turned it into too much yet, but I think the potential is there. Dejon Reynolds comes through with the huge catch. Like, there's a lot to like about the personnel of this offense, about the game planning of this offense, the play calling of this offense, and just the overall, how everything is going with this offense. Even if we just, if we don't, like, set aside, and you can't set it aside, but set aside the fact that they've overcome double-digit deficits in the fourth quarter of the last 2 games. I think if you look at sort of the nuts and bolts of this offense, the players and the plays, the Jimmies and Joes and the X's and O's, I think there's a whole lot to like, and they've got room for improvement, whether it's third down or scoring, early, having more success early in the game or whatever it may be. They've got room for improvement, but everybody has room for improvement. Not all teams seem to have attainable improvement. Not all teams seem to have room for attainable improvement. Or what's the best way to say this? Everybody's got room for improvement. But that improvement is not necessarily attainable for all teams. For Pitt's offense, I think it might be attainable. Now, there's a question mark on the offensive line, for sure. They didn't play well against West Virginia. Gave up too much pressure against Eli Holstein. He's one of the highest pressure rates in the country right now. Holstein, he's been under pressure a lot. And so you've got to adjust some things there. But there's a lot that goes into that. I think you can accommodate or adjust for an offensive line that's not doing a great job protecting. You can get the ball out quicker. You can throw more quick hitters. And I think some of the passes he's held onto the ball and ended up being under pressure, some of those passes were plays that he probably needed to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. But that's attainable. Like, that's improvement you can make. And that's improvement you would expect to make over the course of a 12-game season. When you look at where you are through the first 3 games, I think you look at 9 more games, yeah, you should be getting the ball out faster. You should be able to make those plays a little bit more. And make them a little more quickly. And so like I feel like the improvement for this offense is very much attainable. It doesn't mean they can't take steps back, and I think there will be points where they do, but the improvement for this offense is very much attainable. Now, they're in a unique spot here, and Pitt's had schedules like this a few times in the past where they'll play three FBS games, and then they'll close the month of September or play their fourth week against an FCS team. I think 2021, they had, I think it was New Hampshire. They took all their frustrations from the Western Michigan game out on New Hampshire. 2022, I think they played UMass at the end of September, and that was one I really complained about because I felt like they needed to get their passing game right, and they really just ran the ball and played it conservative, probably because Keaton Slovis was still recovering from his concussion. That's speculation on my part. What's not speculation is they did not use that game to get their passing game right, and then they played Georgia Tech, and their passing game was a mess. But I digress. We've had we've had these years where you've seen Pitt play an FCS team at the end of September, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's just it's inconsequential. I think it's good right now. Now I know can't overlook Youngstown State. Pitt has lost to Youngstown State. They had an overtime game against Youngstown State in 2017. Pat Narduzzi's first year, his first game was a one-score win. It was like 45-37. So we're not taking Youngstown State lightly. No matter, regardless of the fact that they lost to Villanova and Duquesne. Like, we're not overlooking Youngstown State. And I don't mean to imply that I am. Although, quick aside, guys, if I overlook Youngstown State, it doesn't mean a damn thing. It's not going to change the game whatsoever. The players and the coaches are the ones who need to not overlook Youngstown State, not me. That said, I'm not overlooking Youngstown State, but what I am looking at is an opportunity here. It's an opportunity for Pitt to go out and get comfortable with some of the things they need to improve on. Like, you can go out and be better at some of these things because you're playing an FCS team and maybe the level of competition is a little bit lower. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you got better at them. It's just that you were better because the level of competition was lower. But I think you can also go out, get more comfortable doing these things. So like Eli Holstein, we talk about the quick release, getting rid of the ball quicker. Well, here's an opportunity, maybe an opportunity to do it. Maybe, Youngstown State, maybe they'll get a little bit of pressure, or whatever. But it's an opportunity in a game where Pitt should be able to win comfortably. And it's an opportunity for Eli Holstein to work on getting the ball out quicker. So an opportunity for the defensive line to work on attacking as a cohesive unit. It's an opportunity for the linebackers to work on getting better in their assignments, getting better in their fits and the gaps and all their responsibilities. It's an opportunity for all of these guys to get a little more comfortable at the things they need to improve on. And so it's not a get-right game because they're not wrong. They're 3-0, so there's nothing to get right from. But it is a chance to cap September with a win, what should be a pretty sizable win, to work on some key elements. And you don't approach this just like a scrimmage or a practice. You approach it like a game. But there should be an opportunity to work on improving some key elements. And then you get a week off. And here's where it gets really interesting. This is what we're building to here. Because this season really breaks down into 3 segments. Okay? There's the September non-conference schedule. 3 games into that, Pitt's 3-0. They have Youngstown State this week. Okay? Then they have a week off, and then they have the 3-game stretch in October. Okay? Where they have, and this is a huge 3-game stretch in October. At Carolina, at home against Cal, and then a Thursday night at home against Syracuse. And I say this stretch is huge. I mean, every stretch is huge, of course. But right now, and we'll see where it is when Pitt plays these teams, but right now, all 3 of these teams we're talking about, Carolina, Cal, and Syracuse, they're all undefeated. Carolina and Cal are both 3-0. Syracuse is 2-0. And they were off this past week. They're all undefeated. And so, are they all going to be undefeated when they play Pitt? Is Carolina going to be 5-0? Is Cal going to be 5-0? Is Syracuse going to be 6-0 when they play Pitt? I don't know. Probably not. Carolina has a chance. They have James Madison this weekend. They go to Duke next weekend. Maybe Duke kind of gets its offense together a little bit better in 2 weeks, and they're ready to give Carolina a challenge, but we'll see. Cal probably won't be 5-0 when they come to Pittsburgh. They go to Florida State this weekend, which may or may not be a tough game, and then they host Miami. So those 2 games will tell us a lot about Cal. We're going to find out a lot about Cal over the next 2 weeks. or 3 weeks. They might have a bye in there. But heading into the Pitt game on October 12th. And then Syracuse, they have Stanford this week, their ACC kickoff game. Then they have Holy Cross. They go out to UNLV and then go to NC State before coming to Pittsburgh for the Thursday night game. So chances are these teams won't all be undefeated. I'd say Carolina probably has the best chance. They have only 2 games, and they're lighter than Cal's 2 games. But these are 3 teams that have, through the beginning of the season, through the first 3 weeks of the season, played pretty well and stacked up some wins. And so these are going to be huge games for Pitt, because right now these are the teams that are sort of right in that same general area of the ACC as Pitt. And I think if you looked preseason projections, I mean, I'm sure Carolina was picked to be like 3rd or top 3 in the ACC. But if you look at preseason projections, you'd find these teams generally around the same. No, Pitt was in the lower tier. But I think if you were to rank these teams right now in the ACC, you would find them in generally the same tier. And so these are going to be separation games. Can Pitt separate itself from Carolina? Can Pitt separate itself from Cal? Can Pitt separate itself from Syracuse? And then once they get through that, when they've got 7 games down, they have that final push. 5 games in November. It's a rare 5-game November schedule. You don't usually get 5 games in November. Pitt's got it this year at SMU, at home against Virginia, home against Clemson for the home finale, senior night, and then closing the season at Louisville and at Boston College. Now there's some daunting games in there. Like at SMU, maybe doesn't look as daunting as it did at one point. At Virginia, TBD. Home against Clemson. Clemson's always going to be tough. I mean, there are very talented players on that team, even if there are questions about where they're at or how they are. And then at Louisville and at Boston College, if those games were played this weekend, would look like some of the toughest games in the conference. We'll see what Louisville and Boston College look like by the time you get to the end of November. But right now, those look like 2 of the better teams, if not 2 of the best teams in the conference. So an interesting finish there. But you take it one stage at a time. Key, you finish stage 1 this weekend with a win against Youngstown State, and then you go into stage 2, which is a huge stretch of games, like I said, with Carolina, Cal, and Syracuse. But you're going to go into that stage, ideally with a win over Youngstown State this weekend, having posted a 4-0 schedule, get a 4-0 record and make some improvements, keep taking steps forward. Take some steps forward this weekend. You get an off week to get healthy and take more steps forward, and then you dive into those 3 games with a chance to really separate yourself and put yourself in the top, maybe even quarter of the ACC, top 5 at worst. Really interesting opportunity. And Pitt, like I say, and again, I'm not dismissing Youngstown State, but with Youngstown State this weekend and the bye week coming up, they're in a perfect spot. Like this is all lining up perfectly. Get through the non-conference, get that week off, get those 3 games in October, and then that grind through November, where you're really going to find out, where you stand. But for right now, I think they've positioned themselves perfectly to head into what's coming over the next 6 weeks. So, pretty interesting stuff. Pretty interesting times following this Pitt team. We'll see what they do on Saturday, of course. Tomorrow we got the mailbag, so you still have time. Get your questions in on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Go to the Between Fifth and Forbes message board to get our mailbag thread. You can post your questions about Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, or anything else on your mind. We'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag tomorrow. That's right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, we have the post-game show on Saturday night, probably around 8 o'clock, maybe 8:30. We'll see when it actually starts. But whenever it starts, we'll go for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we need to talk about Youngstown State and where this team is heading into the off week. Should be fun conversation. So tune in then. On Saturday night after the game. You want to make sure you don't miss it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video while you're at it, and check out Panther-Lair.com for all the Pitt sports coverage. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you have a great Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.